Let's head to the United States, and we're joined by political commentator and analyst Aidan Smith. Aidan, President-elect Donald Trump said that he would stop the war in 24 hours. Obviously, that's going to be difficult in that kind of time frame. That was all part of the election trail. What do you think will happen?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, to say the least, I don't think that anyone, including Trump himself, really believes the 24 hours mark. I think that what we're really going to see is under Trump, probably you'll see the State Department pivot, and this is just my guess, towards pushing for, a settlement agreement that isn't particularly favorable to like what most of Kiev lawmakers want, would presumably include some territorial gains by Russia regarding some of its occupied territory. I think for Trump, and a lot of people have suggested this, but for Trump, when he's already won the presidency, probably the main goal for him is to actually get the Nobel Peace Prize, which Obama received in 2010, and it's always been something that, according to most people who know Trump, is one of the most coveted things for him in terms of taking office. So, I mean, we'll see. I think that in terms of a big variable would just be how much success Ukraine actually has in terms of their attacks into Russian territory. I think that's a huge variable, and it could very well be that even if the war is looking, unfortunately, more in favor of the Russian invaders right now, obviously we're not, as someone not on the ground, it's entirely possible that Ukraine, with these additional weapons, could make real gains in terms of preserving their territory.
What have you made of part of these final few weeks of the Biden administration? We saw a day where the most pardons ever were given.
Yeah, I mean, it almost harkens back 8 years ago during the first inauguration period and the transition period after Trump was elected. I think Barack Obama gave a lot of high-profile commutations and pardons, I believe, to Chelsea Manning, just one of them, if I recall correctly. I think for Biden, it's trying to solidify a legacy and, obviously huge disappointment with him, not just among the general electorate, but a lot of his own voters. And because of that, doing stuff like giving commutations, showing kind of like pivoting towards being more pro-criminal justice reform in these final days is a good way, I'm sure his team believe, to solidify his image going forward.
Yeah, what about FBI Director Chris Wray? He'll be gone before Trump comes in.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting compared to 8 years ago when, James Comey actually had to get fired by Trump after he took office. Wray deciding to leave, and then obviously we're going into a pretty heated confirmation battle with FBI Director nominee Patel. I think that Wray's resignation off the bat kind of shows that he doesn't want to have to deal with trials and tribulations of being in a second Trump term. I think that he'd prefer to just leave, probably go into a really lucrative job in the private sector rather than have to try to tread water in the Trump admin for a few months before inevitably getting fired. So that's kind of my read on it.
What about the tariff situation? A lot of Americans are fearful that some of the chat around large tariffs to other countries could come back and burn them.
Totally. I mean, I think it's interesting because I think it's pretty much among economists, both left and right, no one is optimistic, to say the least, about what the tariff proposals would mean. These are really, really likely to be recessionary if fully implemented. I think from my vantage point, it's something that the Trump admin might try to pursue, especially just in a public image way, do a select set of really high profile tariffs, call this a boost for American manufacturing, and then, back off when Wall Street industry pushes really hard back against it. I think what's kind of interesting is that since Trump was elected, you've seen a really sharp gains in the stock market across the board, especially in the first few days after. People have noticed that it doesn't seem like Wall Street is really pricing in the prospect of tariffs, which I think is interesting. But yeah, I think that's the single biggest variable, because if you do have these tariffs of this size, the recessionary impact is pretty much likely, and that would be really damaging to the GOP in 2026 midterms and 2028 election, I think.
Finally, Ron DeSantis, do you think he'll be appointed into a high office? It's looking that way, although he's obviously got plenty of baggage with a few people already close to Donald Trump.
Totally. It's really interesting, and this kind of always happens during the cabinet confirmation process. you see people like DeSantis, who obviously fell out of Trump circle's favor basically 2 years ago. I'm actually not sure what the latest news are in terms of him getting slid into one of the more contested spots. I know there was news fairly recently of him theoretically being chosen to lead the Pentagon, given the Hegseth confirmation battle. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's something where Trump and DeSantis's relationship is just really hard to, assess from afar, given Trump's very negative reaction to him running against him in 2024. But also, it's definitely possible this wouldn't be the first time a former Trump rival got appointed by him to something.
Oh, well, you see it, don't you? Marco Rubio and others. It's intriguing, and it's going to continue that way for a number of years, Aidan. Always good to chat. Hopefully we'll talk before Christmas. If not, have a wonderful festive season.